The Financial Times reported in 2012 that
economic growth in the UK is flatlining and the government is desperate to find new ways to help business. One way, it thinks, is to tear up thousands of regulations, starting with the planning law and in particular, the Green Belt.
Barney Stringer, who runs a planning consultancy, also makes a case for building on London's Green Belt.
So, Green Belt is not some uniquely precious and valuable and wonderful land. Some of it is, some of it isn't. It's just land. It's designated as land near the city. That's what it is. And it's a big variety, the good, the bad and the ugly.
Simon Jenkins agrees that some Greenbelt land could be built on, but is emphatic that we must not do it.
At the moment, you have the ridiculous situation in which you have a lot of Greenbelt. I mean, I wouldn't 2 or 3%, I'd say 10, 20% of Greenbelt could be built on in some shape or form. And I designate it as such. But at the moment, we have to fight every inch of the way because the pressures from property developers to build on those sites is so intense.
Jenkins' comment set me thinking. Could we have a new principle which would allow some Greenbelt land to be developed and the rest to be taken into protective ownership? Let's look at 2 examples, both 20 kilometres downriver from Tower Bridge. In the 19th century, they were green and pleasant lands. Rainham Marsh is on the north bank and is owned by the London Borough of Havering. In 1999, the Borough Council invited English partnerships to apply for permission to build warehouses on the marshes. The application proved, to me, that Jenkins is right. Public authorities and other landowners cannot be trusted to protect the Green Belt. They may delay development, and they do raise land prices, but they do not protect the land. Luckily, there was a public outcry at Rainham, which stopped the development. It's now an excellent wildlife reserve, partly in the safe ownership of the RSPB. This chart shows that every year more and more Greenbelt land is being released for housing. I would describe it as being sacrificed for housing. There are no similarities with releasing prisoners or with releasing animals which have been held in captivity. Crayford Marsh, also within London, is opposite Rainham on the south bank of the Thames. It's in the Green Belt, and much of it belongs to the Russell Stoneham estate, which applied for permission to build the Howbury Rail Freight Terminal. Bexley Council said no, but its decision was overturned on appeal in 2007. I think this was wrong, and that it set a terrible precedent. But one can see that the land would not do well on a landscape quality assessment. Its social, ecological and visual qualities are low. Construction of the freight terminal has not started yet, possibly for financial reasons. So the owners may be wondering if they could get planning permission for housing. The Russell Stoneham estate offered Bexley Council 50 hectares of farmland in return for the industrial permission. What would it offer in return for residential planning permission? Let's have a look at the land values to see what kind of deal might be struck. In 2015, the government published these figures for land values. The agricultural and industrial values are national. The residential value is for land in Bexley. The Howbury Park estate comprises 63 hectares of land for industry, together with a historic property and 50 hectares of farmland, which were offered as a gift to the public. The figures indicate that the Russell Stoneham estate was willing to exchange assets worth about £3 million for about £30 million in cash. The Industrial Planning Permission had raised the value of land by a multiple of 10. But if residential permission were granted, the land value would rise by a multiple of over 150, from 3 million to over 470 million. And for this sum of money, one wonders, would the Russell Stoneham estate be willing to give the public land worth £10 million? I think it would. And this would place most of Crayford and Dartford Marsh, which the estate owns, into protective trust ownership. The estate might, in fact, do the deal on a multiple of 10 by exchanging 450 hectares of agricultural land worth £10 million for only 14 hectares of housing land, which would be worth £105 million. Now, let's consider whether a similar arrangement could be applied to the whole of London's green belt and to its housing problem. In 2015, the Greater London Authority estimated London's housing demand at 42,000 new dwellings per year. A Crayford-style grand bargain might provide land for housing together with permanent protection for most of the green belt. Here are the figures. ADAS estimates the area of farmland within the London green belt at 13,608 hectares. Using the UK-wide figure for the value of agricultural land, it has an existing use value of £286 million. If the owners accepted twice the existing use value, this land could be bought for £572 million. To raise this sum, it would only be necessary to sell 76 hectares of land at £7.5 million per hectare. The best land to sell would be that with the lowest landscape value, assessed using social, ecological and scenic criteria. If 10% of the land was used for housing and high residential densities were achieved, it could meet London's housing need for many years to come. The Crayford-style grand bargain would require, first, a landscape assessment of each parcel of land in the greenbelt to see that all the best land would be conserved. Second, it would require an arrangement for pooling and distributing the profit on housing land between participating landowners. It just wouldn't be fair if one landowner got rich for neglecting his land while his neighbour got nothing because his land was beautiful. The pooling arrangement could be done on a whole greenbelt basis, or it could be done on a more local basis. Ian McHarg, a famous Scots-American landscape architect, helped set up an arrangement like this in his plan for the valleys in Baltimore County on the east coast of America. Third, the protected greenbelt landscape should be improved to raise our stock of public goods. Dieter Helms explains why this should be done.
It's perfectly right to say, look, this land around cities could yield much, much greater benefits to the inhabitants of those cities if it was better managed. And since we're paying a great deal of the total income of farmers, we have a sensible economic rationale for demanding a much better use of that land. And you're absolutely right. A lot of it doesn't have proper access. Well, the solution to that is not to say, therefore we should concrete over it. The solution to that problem is to say, therefore let's see if we can make better access and make better use of this land. And it comes full circle to the question of, if we're going to have another 10 million people in this country, if we're going to go on growing at 2 to 3% per annum, these green spaces will be even more valuable in 50 years' time than they are now, because they'll be even more precious given how much development will in any event take place. There will always be an excess demand for people to live in beautiful green spaces close to cities which have technical, university, other merits. It's not going to go away, it's going to be there forever. Will you solve the problems? No. Will you have destroyed the greenbelt system you have and the opportunity we now have to really make something of that? Yes, you'll have done that in the process. Before you know it, you've lost this phenomenally large economic opportunity to make something better of what is just a prohibition-type approach we have at the moment. What a waste.
The Radio 4 Costing the Earth programme, in which Dieter Helm made these remarks, concludes with a summary from Tom Heap, its presenter.
In short, Greenbelt could be a lot greener if it were more about opening up spaces for wildlife and recreation rather than simply shutting them down for building.